You're watching NFL Daily. Our free agency frenzy coverage continues. Day number 2. It's been an eventful one so far, but there's still plenty of good talent available for your favorite team to potentially add. Tyler Jones here. Thanks for stopping by. Before we go over the full list of free agents that are remaining, I want to make sure you subscribe to the best NFL coverage around as we're talking NFL news, rumors, trades, draft, free agency, and more. We are your offseason headquarters here on NFL Daily. You ain't alive, you ain't subscribed. Lock us in all offseason long as we continue our live coverage of free agency. We'll also be live for the draft coming up next month as well. Best part about it, 100% free. Subscribe now for free. You'll be glad you did. Calvin Ridley remains available, and the reports that we heard from Calvin Ridley was that he would like to return to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but the New England Patriots are making a significant push for his services. So can the Jags come up with an offer that is similar to what the Patriots are looking at for Calvin Ridley? And then on top of that, something else to think about with Calvin Ridley is going to be the factor of his trade from last year with the Falcons. If he's to return to the Jags, then based on compensation from that trade, he would likely need to wait until after 4 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday for the Jags to benefit the most to get a deal done. So we'll monitor that situation and see if Calvin Ridley ultimately ends up in Jacksonville or not, and how that situation unfolds there with Calvin Ridley. Last season, over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, his first season back since the suspension from gambling in 2022. Next on the list is Justin Simmons. Justin Simmons, most recently with the Denver Broncos, 70 tackles, 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups last year. A lot of teams looking for help in the secondary, and we have seen a lot of guys come off the board within the last couple of days. Justin Simmons is going to be the next one to watch to see ultimately where he ends up. Last season, did it all. 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 70 tackles, and 2 tackles for loss there with the Denver Broncos. Next, Tyron Smith, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys. Very solid last season. One of the more dependable players on the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. 12 games played last year, 1 sack allowed. And the Cowboys have been an interesting team. The fact that they really done nothing when it comes to free agency here. And a guy like Smith, of his talent, his caliber, who is going to be willing to pay the price to bring in Smith? That remains to be seen, as he's coming off a season where he looked very solid. His numbers, according to PFF, 83.8 overall grade, only allowed 1 sack and 1 hit. Did get called for 3 penalties in 16 hurries. He was very solid there, Tyron Smith was. Meanwhile, Arik Armstead also on the list. Arik Armstead had a nice bounce-back season in 2023. 5 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 27 tackles. The year prior, had no sacks in 9 games played, so it's a step in the right direction. We'll see exactly where he goes and if he can have a similar impact to what he had in 2023 or if he'll be like what we saw in 2022. Plenty of players out there available. Who's the best free agent left in this class of 2024 free agents? Well, in the comments section, let us know what you think. Give us a name that comes to mind there. Next on the list, Marquise Brown, who last played with the Arizona Cardinals. Prior to that, the Baltimore Ravens. When the Ravens traded Marquise Brown to the Arizona Cardinals, they got a first-round pick. He was coming off a 1,000-yard season. But what we've seen out of Marquise Brown has been a bit of disappointment the last 2 years in Arizona. Last year, one of the worst seasons, if not the worst of his career. 51 catches, 574 yards, 4 touchdowns. Can he get back to what he was in 2021 with over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns? That remains to be seen. We'll see what happens with Hollywood Brown. Chase Young next on the list. Chase Young, 25 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. Began his year with the Commanders, was traded at the deadline to San Francisco, and he's got plenty of teams interested. A lot of visits lined up for Chase Young. But the question becomes with Chase Young, what player are you getting? We've seen him look phenomenal at times. But we've seen the bad with Chase Young, too. He got benched last year in the postseason. But now you look at Chase Young, you wonder, can he stay healthy and can he play at an elite level coming off a year where he had 7.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups, and 25 tackles there with the Washington Commanders, followed by the San Francisco 49ers with the trade at the trade deadline. Watch out. We'll see what Chase Young does and where he ends up there. Next up we find is Josh Reynolds of the Detroit Lions. Reynolds had a bounce-back season in 2023. 40 catches, 608 yards, 15.2 yards per reception with 5 touchdowns. A guy that is viewed as kind of a bargain free agent of sorts, as he's somebody that you would think isn't going to cost a ton potentially for the next team he goes to. And we've seen him successful in different systems. He's played for a variety of different teams, the Titans, the Lions, the Rams. Josh Reynolds looking to build upon what he did last year in Detroit. Jadeveon Clowney, man, he's been a journeyman of sorts, former number 1 overall pick out of South Carolina, coming off a nice bounce-back season with the Baltimore Ravens this past year, where he had 9.5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. The return to the Ravens seems like a possibility for him again. Remember, he was kind of phased out of the Cleveland Browns defense there in 2022. So you have to wonder, Jadeveon Clowney looking to go somewhere where he can see fit, where he can play a significant role like he did in Baltimore last year. The Seattle Seahawks, a team that's been mentioned, potentially him following Mike McDonald, his defensive coordinator there in Baltimore. Kendall Fuller also on this list. Kendall Fuller, it's been a fun career for Kendall Fuller. Began in Washington, goes to Kansas City, wins a Super Bowl, was in that Alex Smith trade several years ago. Now he's been back at Washington, and he's played some of the best football of his career as of late. 2 interceptions, 9 pass breakups last year. The year prior had 3 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. Was very good there and was widely viewed going into this free agency market as one of, if not the best free agent corners around. He's still looking for his next home potentially. We'll see where he goes. DJ Reader on the list, 34 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 fumble recovery last year. DJ Reader still looking to see where his name is ultimately going to get called in free agency at this point. DJ Reader doesn't seem like there's an obvious fit for where he could go, and certainly has something to prove of sorts after the season he had in 2023. We'll see where DJ Reader ultimately ends up after what he did in his 2023 campaign on that front. We'll keep an eye on that and see where DJ Reader ultimately goes, trying to build upon what he did last season there. Next up, Odell Beckham Jr., OBJ. What a year it was in 2023 for OBJ. His first since the ACL injury and the Super Bowl title he had with the LA Rams. Goes to the Baltimore Ravens, and it was a roller coaster of sorts. He struggled to stay healthy. He struggled to stay consistent in that Baltimore Ravens offense. Reports earlier out this week that the Ravens were likely not going to retain OBJ. OBJ ended up with just 3 touchdowns, 565 yards. Wherever OBJ goes, you have to think that he's not going to be a number 1 or number 2 receiver anymore, that he would likely be a number 3 receiver in his next location. Would you sign OBJ? Let us know what you think. Type OBJ for yes or no BJ for no. Do you want OBJ on your favorite team? Let us know what you think. OBJ for yes, no BJ for no. Chime in the comment section and let us know. Next on the list, we head to Minnesota. That's where we find DJ Wonnum on this list. 62 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, and 6 pass breakups. Minnesota with some major changes. They're losing Danielle Hunter and Kirk Cousins, among others. Now we'll see ultimately where he ends up as the market has been pretty quiet on that front there. Next we find from the Baltimore Ravens, Kevin Zeitler on the list. And when you look at Big Kev, this is somebody that was a huge part of the Baltimore Ravens, but they don't have the money to bring him back. They will likely have to move on from him. And what you see with Zietler is this is somebody that was consistent, right? In nearly 1,000 snaps last year. Had a pretty good rate. Just allowed 2 sacks, 1 hit, 16 hurries, 4 penalties. Solid piece. But the way that the market has gone with offensive linemen, the Ravens and several other teams are kind of priced out of potentially paying for a guy like Kevin Zietler there. We'll see ultimately where he goes. He'll be a name to watch here in the coming days of where the market goes with him on that front. Keep an eye on him. We'll see where he ultimately ends up. Next on the list, we find Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore, he's had a fun career. Most recently there with the Dallas Cowboys. Had a solid season, a good bounce-back year for him. 68 tackles, 2 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. If your team is needing a corner, potentially be that number 2 guy of sorts, Stephon Gilmore could be that guy on the outside. Coming off the season, we mentioned the 2 interceptions, 13 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble, 68 tackles. All of those numbers were up from what we saw in 2022. And if he were to leave Dallas, he'd be playing for his, what is it now, 5th different team in the last 5 years, which is just crazy as far as that goes. The linebacker market is dwindling pretty fast as Devin White is one of, if not the best, inside linebackers left at this point in time. Most recently with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Coming off a season where it was a bit of a down year for Devin White, 83 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. He's been a dynamic player over the years, but is he starting to take that step back going forward? Is he the same player that he was a couple of years ago? Probably not, but there's enough teams that need help at the linebacker position that Devin White, you have to imagine, will find a home sooner than later. Next on our list, we go to New Orleans and find Andreas Peat with this pick. Andreas Peat, 13 games played last year, 2 sacks allowed, 8 hits. His overall grade from PFF, not anything over the top. 60.2 was his grade last year, and he's playing with something to prove, trying to see if he can do better than what he did last year there with the New Orleans Saints on that front. Want to make sure you subscribe to NFL Daily by Chat Sports as we're bringing you the latest happenings across the National Football League. We've been live for 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. We'll be live again Wednesday, and we'll be live for the NFL Draft as well. So if you're an NFL diehard, this is the channel for you. Subscribe now, youtube.com/chatsportstv for the latest happenings all off-season long across the National Football League. We got you covered. Subscribe now, youtube.com/chatsportstv. You'll be glad you did. Next up, we find Coleman Shelton, another guy that just solid, not great, not bad. Just had a solid campaign in 2023. Overall grade, according to PFF, 64.5, over 1,100 snaps. So a lot of reliability when it came to Coleman Shelton last year. Did allow 2 sacks, 11 hits, 21 hurries, and 6 penalties there last season. Isaiah Wynn also on the list as well, most recently with the Miami Dolphins. And although he only played in 7 games, the numbers look pretty good with Isaiah Wynn. Did not allow any sacks, no hits, just 4 QB pressures in that stretch for Isaiah Wynn there with Miami. And next on the list, we find Laken Tomlinson, who last year got a lot of playing time, nearly 1,100 snaps last year. Grade wasn't great, 55 overall, did allow 7 sacks, 10 hits, 34 hurries, 3 penalties. Got to think that it's probably going to be a while before his name potentially gets called on that front. Not one of the more higher priority free agents compared to the others that are out there at this point in time. We'll see exactly where he goes. Next up, Steven Nelson. Steven Nelson was fantastic last season with the Houston Texans. 4 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, 63 tackles, and kind of forgotten about of sorts. I'm surprised that we're still talking about Steven Nelson potentially being available and trying to find a home of some sorts. His old team, the Houston Texans, made some big moves over the last couple days with adding the likes of Danielle Hunter and Joe Mixon and company. Could he make a return or will he go elsewhere? That remains to be seen. Thanks for joining us here on this edition of NFL Daily. For the latest happenings across the National Football League, we got you covered. Subscribe now, and we shall see you next time.